Good evening, everyone. We are going to start in 2-3 minutes. Please wait. So we had another meeting going on, so that it got delayed. So hope all of you had a good recap of what we learned last week. My name is Arvind Azad. I was one of the faculty last week. So this week we will build on what we learned last week. So it will be interesting to go further. So we have Danish also on the call. Danish? Danish, can you hear me?
Yes, Arvind, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so we can start, Danish. So we have people joining, so we can probably start in the introduction and then by the time everyone will join. Danish, let us start.
Arvind, I don't have screen share.
Admin presentation rights. Okay, 1 second. Can you check now, Danish, please?
Yeah.
So welcome everyone. So this is, as I said, a follow-up to last week's session. So last week, if you remember, we talked about what are APIs, why APIs are important, why do we need to learn APIs, what is the basic structure of an API. We talked about various aspects of API in terms of specification, the implementation, and how API abstracts the complexity of the implementation. So a lot of interesting things we learn. So we will build on top of that, as in we will go to the next level. So we also last week tried an API client, right? So we tried to consume an API from NASA, and all of you logged into your Google Cloud Shell, and then probably all of you have tried it. So we will start building on what we learned last week so that now we can actually develop an API this week. Over to you, Danish.
Yeah. Thanks, Arvind.
So please ask questions as you see them in the chat window. So we'll try to answer as and when we move from one slide to the other. Thanks.
So, as Arvind mentioned, so we are actually going to look at an aspect of what we saw last week in detail. So this is a slide from last week where Arvind gave an overview of how APIs work, right? What are APIs, how they work, how are they consumed. So quick recap is that we have an API consumer who actually looks at an API specification to see what the API does, and then there is an actual API that is implemented that conforms to this specification. Now, if we want to see in detail what an API specification looks like, we will go forward to the next slide. So an example of an API specification is an open API standard. It is a specification that actually describes what an API does. So you can write that specification using JSON, JavaScript, object notation, or YAML. Um, why would we need this and how will it help? So everybody would be familiar with Play Store, whether it is Google Play Store or on the iPhone, the App Store, right? So you have a lot of apps, games, everything here. So you don't need to actually see the code of this app to understand what it does. You just go to this store and then you take a look at this page or this app and this screen. You see that there are these apps that do various things, right? So, or games. So that is at a high level what this open API standard or an API specification aims to do. Through this open API standard, you basically tell what your API does, and you can list it in a marketplace or in something like a Play Store. It's not an app, but it's a place on a web, right? So you have an API management portal or a developer portal where a lot of APIs are listed. Somebody can go and see what they are interested in. So, like last week, NASA listed their APIs, right? So, and they said what inputs are required, what output will come out. All those details are present in a place which can be consumed. So, we built a client to consume that photo of the day. So what we did there was we went through the specifications and then we provided the inputs and got an output. Now the specification, how do we write that specification is what we are going to see. And to further explain why would we need this specification? So if you, for example, go to a laundry and you want to give some clothes for dry cleaning, they have a menu card like this saying for this unit or this particular item of this type, these are the charges, and so on and so forth. So how much time it will take and all those details will be there in that. So similarly, this API specification will tell you what are the inputs you have to give and what will you get as a output, or will you get an error if there is some problem. So those are the rough analogy. Similar to your menu card, you will have some details also. Now you can write this open API specification, as I mentioned, in YAML or JSON formats. The purpose of this, as I mentioned, is to get a detail or get an overview of what are APIs available, to discover the APIs. Also, you can do the documentation instead of writing it as a separate document about, let's say, in this Play Store, there will be some text which will say what this does. So all those things you will do it inside this particular open API standard. And also, if you see, you will have the details of the input and the output. And then next one is you have these API management tools which use this open API standard to display all the details similar to your app store. And then finally, you have the ability to generate source for client and server. So you can actually generate the code from this API. So we will look at some of these things as we go forward. But the most important thing that you need to know is using this open API specification, you have to basically have, the thing that you enable is getting details about an API without looking at the source code, without looking at the implementation. So how does this open API standard looks like? How does it look? What does it contain? How does it describe that particular API? So we have some formats, right? So you are familiar with some file formats, some database structure, which you will use for various purposes. Similarly, or you might have used HTML files, you would have used XML files. Um, so some of these have a set format. For example, most of us are familiar with HTML. So HTML has a root tag HTML, and then there is a title, head, body, and inside that there are again some set of tags for creating the table or whatever other things you want to do. Similarly, here also you have set of elements. So you have these elements which describe what the API does. This is not to see the API, but it is more to understand what it does. So if we look at this structure, so here again, similar to HTML or XML or other format, it starts with a root tag, which is the open API tag itself. It tells the tools like API management tools that whatever this is talking about is an open API specification. And this is the version of this particular specification, and you have some information which is detail about this particular API, high level detail. What is the title? What does this description do? What is the version? So all these high level details are present in this particular info element or container. So you have open API tag, then you have this info, and then it tells in the servers where this particular API is running, where in which server. So I have given in this example local host and port, which means that it is running on my machine. It can actually run wherever you want to. You can deploy it on some cloud platform. You can deploy it on some open other infrastructure also that is available. Or you can call an existing API and point that URL here, whatever, right? So to basically, it is basically saying that where that particular API is running. Tags basically will tell you some more details. So if I am putting this in an API management portal, and just imagine like a Play Store. So and then I am searching for inventory, or I am searching for item or order, so I can put those keywords here. So tags are nothing but keywords to identify the particular API. Then next comes the important thing, the paths. So what are paths? So in the URL, you will have some slash something. So you, let's say localhost slash 8501 slash, and then you have a path which says queues, SKUS. And then after that, you have a path where you give an input parameter, some ID, and you call a get method. So last time in the API client, we for NASA we called the uh, get method in that. So similarly, we can give a get method here, and then you will give the details saying what are the inputs that you have to give and what is the output you will get. So here we are saying SKU means item. So SKU stands for store keeping unit, which means if you are ordering an item, if you are ordering a shirt, or if you are ordering a mobile phone from Amazon or from Flipkart or wherever, inside for each of these to uniquely identify, they use the abbreviation SKU, store keeping unit. So, and along with that, they will put some identifiers to identify that this is a Van Heusen shirt of size S or a medium, and it is available in so many quantities. This is the price. Is it in stock? Is it out of stock? So to identify that uniquely, they use a term called as SKU, store keeping unit. So this being an inventory API, which tells what items are available, what is in stock, what is not in stock, it has this particular method called SKU. So if I call this particular method from this path, so if I go to localhost colon this thing slash SKU slash, if I give that particular parameter, we will see all this in the hands-on also. So it will be more clear as we go along. So you will basically get details about that particular item. So if I say item ID 123 and it is about a particular shirt, or if it is about a mobile phone, all the details will be returned. If you that particular ID is available, it will give a response code 200 and it will give the item details. If it is not available, then it will say not found, SKU not found 404. It will say that this particular item is missing. Whatever ID you gave is not found in the database, just like a SQL, right? So it will go and check, and it is not there. It will give you a 404 missing. Then what will be returned, we will see in these schemas. And what security options are there, they are also present. So for example, in this, we have not included a security element, but if you were to add a security element, it can have details like last week we gave an API key. To access that NASA API, we provided a key, and only on that key, we were able to get that particular response. And we also discussed on how the security helps in preventing the um, a particular API from getting bombarded with requests from unknown consumers or unauthorized consumers. And there are different ways to secure it. So for this hands-on or for this particular overview, we are not going into much detail of security. Next week, Arvind will actually tell us more details on how we secure APIs. So this week, we are just giving an overview on the most core concepts of this particular specification. So when we look at security next week, we will also see what other options are there to secure an API apart from API key. OR, JWT, all these are there. They are typically implemented using an API management portal. Though it is an option that is available in this specification also, but it is usually implemented as part of a API management product. And then there are a few other things which we will see in this particular schema or this specification itself that you need to understand. So we saw the root tag, we know what it is for, we know what the info is for. It is for telling about the particular API. Servers are basically telling where that API is running. Tags are keywords to identify when you search for that API. Paths are basically to give that particular path and call that particular method and get a response. So get SKU on a path, so like slash SKU slash this particular ID will give you the details of that particular item. And you will get a response with that particular item details, which we will see how it is defined, or you will get an error. Now, what is the response that you will get if it is successful? So you have something called as a schema element in which you will describe. You can imagine schema like a database structure. So you have a table, right? So it will have ID, it will have name, various attributes, right? So columns will be there. So likewise, you have schemas. In the schema, you have various elements like SKU payload. So inside this, you have some details like required, what is the type, what are the properties, etc. So if you consider an object-oriented data model, so if you are familiar with object-oriented programming, you have objects that will contain attributes, right? So the attributes will actually say give more details about that particular object. So in this case, we are saying this schema will tell that we are talking about a product and it has a product ID. So payload is nothing but whatever response is getting returned to your query. So you want details about a product, it is coming as part of a payload, as part as a response. Payload is nothing but your response. Okay, so that payload will have a product ID. Required means mandatory. It will be an object. It will contain some details like product ID. It can be a number. It will be, and you have these details. So it is of type number. There is a description which says it is a reference to the product. Like I said, SKU means SKU, product are all similar terms. So if you have this, you will basically be able to identify what is that product or what is that particular item that we are talking about. So the schema is for that purpose. And then you have this SKU itself, the item, which we are going to return. So how this is defined is it contains an ID, okay, the SKU ID, which will uniquely identify, and then you have a product ID. Now, there is a relationship between these two. Like you have an employee and department, so you have a SKU ID and a product ID. Product means it will be always same. So you will have a shirt, okay. So whether it is there on in stock, all those details are part of this SKU or ID. Product means it will always be the same thing. So Van Heusen's shirt, let's say, is a product. SKU will say how many such products are there. Is it in stock? Where is it in stock? Is it available in Bangalore warehouse? In Bangalore warehouse, how many are in stock? That is what it will say. What is the product that is in stock? That detail comes from this product ID, product. Okay. What category, all these details. So all you need to understand is you don't need to understand what is SKU product and all. For this, you need to know that if you are going to model a particular API or if you are going to describe a particular API, you will need to have these schemas. This will give you the output. Suppose if you want to write an API that you want to give details about some games, right? So you have a list of games that you have stored somewhere. And if I give a query saying what games are available, if you want to return, you can have again similar API where you will have open API. In info, you will say game list API, something like that. You will say where it is running. In the tags, you will say some keywords. This is a game list API. And paths, you will say get game details or list game details. So if I say whatever URL slash games, and then if I give an ID, it will say give the details about that particular game. So what details I will get, that I need to define using these schemas. In this schema, I will have one payload which will return the particular details. That payload will contain these details. It will have an ID. It will whatever game details you want to share, the game ID, game name, what is the type of that, all those things you will define in this particular schema object. So that is the purpose of this schema. It is the one that is going to contain the actual response or the error code. So if you have some missing thing, you will give an error. We will see that in detail when we go into the editor, and we will also try a scenario so that we understand it better. So before we go to the scenario, we can pause for any questions.
Then there are a couple of questions. Then there are a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One was what is the programming language that used for the specification? I mentioned as YAML. You want to add anything? You can add. And second question was what is the components referred to in the specification?
Yeah, components consists of that schema. So if we go back, we will also see. So inside these components, you have the schemas. So you can have, if you want to actually, I mean, it's a next level detail. So you can have more details, as in you can have another specification also that you can embed here. So like this inventory, you can have another one like item. You can create a separate open API specification, and you can put it as part of components. So think of it components like you have objects, right? So you have in one object, and you can actually have interfaces, right? So in that interface, what you do in Java, let's say you are familiar with Java, you have an interface. In that you say, I will have a lot of methods declared, but you will not implement anything. The implementation will happen elsewhere. So you compose in the implementation, you will have lot of objects where you will actually compose those things. You will have multiple objects that can be there. So likewise, in this inventory API, you can have lot of sub inventory APIs or item APIs if you want to. So that will come inside this component. So that is the purpose. But for this, basic understanding is component will consist of any reusable part, and mostly we will have schemas only here. So where you define what schema you want to return, what are the attributes, that will be the ones that will be defined inside these components. But the higher purpose of components is anything you want to do as a reuse, you can put it inside this in these components. Any other question that is there? One schema, is it sufficient for a case study? So it depends on the case, right? So how complex that case is. So if we take a particular scenario, it can be that it may have multiple schemas also. So in our scenario, if you see, we are going to talk about an e-commerce application, and inside that only one particular use case, only one scenario we are going to look at. For that, possibly one schema is sufficient. But if we want to do that end-to-end flow, right, from order to cash, so from the time you placed an order to whatever you got the item, right, till the time you got back the item, maybe one schema is not enough there. You will have multiple schemas. You may have a schema for order. You will have a schema for item. You will have you may have a schema for shipment, right? You may have a schema for payments. So many things will come in. So, but in those cases, maybe the number of APIs also will be different. So the right question will be, will you have one schema for an API, or you will have more than one schema for an API? So typical cases, you may have one schema per API, that is minimum. But in some cases, you may have more than one schema for that particular API also. So for example, in the inventory API, if I want to have two schemas, one schema for item, one schema for SKU, item or product. So remember, it is again depending on the use case. And item or product means it is something which is fixed. So this shirt is manufactured by Van Heusen. That is fixed. Whether that shirt is in stock or is it not in stock, that will be told by the SKU. So I can have two schemas. One schema for SKU, which composes of or comprises of another schema for the product. So then I or item. So there are two schemas there. So in that case, you could have two schemas. Hope that answered the question. Okay, some question on sections and certificate. I'm not sure about that.
No,
So
all
let
three
us.
section, all three sessions has to be attended to get the certificate.
Okay, now let us look at the scenario. This is a common scenario, and we will not go into much detail. We will take one aspect of the uh, e-commerce ordering process, right? So we all use e-commerce platforms. We actually place orders, or sometimes we just go and browse and see what is available, right? And then there are some steps that happen behind the scenes. So let us try to see first, understand what happens, and then we will see what we will build as part of this particular hands-on exercise. So first is you have a e-commerce application. So whether on phone or web, some Amazon or Flipkart or whatever, you use that application. You like something, you place an order. Okay, till this part, it is visible to us, customers or consumers. What happens after that? So there are order management applications, order management systems, OMS. So they will receive this order, okay, whatever you have placed, and then before they fulfill, they will actually check the availability. So this inventory API that we will build will actually talk to this inventory system to see where that particular item is available or whether it is available or not. Okay. And then it will give a response back to this OMS. In actual life, if it is not available in one warehouse in Bangalore, it will go to another place, etc. So that is a complicated thing. But for our scenario, for this hands-on, what we are limiting to is this much. So you place an order, it goes to OMS. OMS checks the item availability, for which it calls this inventory API, which will have two halves. One half is your open API specification, which we will define or we will go through. And then the other half, which will be the implementation of that particular specification, right? So that is the basic flow that we are going to follow today. And this particular inventory system, we will, and these things, three boxes, we will not have because these are in actual flow. So we will actually invoke this API directly through a client. And then this system, we will just create some sample code where we will give some standard responses, some basic response. So first hands-on is basically to understand in detail whatever we discussed or whatever we looked at for this open API spec creation. So as a first step, you can open a browser and go to this particular URL. So I can type this in the chat window so that it is easier. Once you open that, you will come to this page. After you come here, you need to click on this inventory.yml. And then once you come here, you need to click on this raw, this button. Once you come here, you have to copy this URL. After you
I
do
have
that,
pasted the URL in the chat. You can
oh,
see.
okay, okay. Then you can come to this particular editor. So here also I will paste it. Once you come here, you can do a import URL. Then paste this. Sorry, not this. If we are till here, I will next start saying some more, sharing more details about what we have done till here and what we are going to do inside this editor. If anybody has any difficulty till now, please type in the chat window. Okay. So this Swagger editor. See, one more information is this Open API. Earlier, it was known as Swagger. Okay, so that is why you see still this Swagger is written. So now it is known as Open API. Old name for that or older versions of Open API were known as Swagger. So the Swagger editor is basically used to understand and create these specifications. Whatever I showed you in that screenshot, in that slides, right? They are nothing but screenshots from here. If you see, Open API root tag is here. You have info, right? All these things is what I showed you there. You have the description, then you have the paths, and inside the paths I made some changes here. Whatever was there, some changes, if you had followed closely, some SKU and all was there. Here we are directly saying item. Okay, instead of saying SKU, I changed it here. So some parts there are some details, so some changes are here. So basically the idea is you can model this or create this particular API specification using this Swagger editor. So the way you do it is you can either start from scratch, where you will say file and then you can clear the editor like a new, and then you can start typing, or you say file and you import some existing ones and you can change it. Suppose you want to change this item, you want to put it back as SKU. Okay, and you will see that on the right hand side something changed. So for those who didn't follow, I'll go back and do the same thing. So it was like this here. See here on the right hand side under item. So this is the path. So if you say this URL slash item, okay, you will actually have this. Under that there is a path called slash item. So now if I make any change to this, so if I put this or if I put this, you will see that there is a change that is happening here. So this is the visual part of it. Whatever you are doing, you will get it here. So you will see. And if you remember this App Store, Play Store example I was telling, so whatever you do it, see on the right hand side, this you will see in most of the API management products, which are nothing but like your Play Store or App Store. So they will have these details. So if we go to that NASA ops thing, it will also have the similar type of things. We looked at this last week. So here too, if you see, there are these things, okay, and you have these query parameters and example query. So similarly, you have some details here which say what are the parameters, okay, and what is the response you will get. So now if we go into some detail, so you have this path SKU. So if I'm going to add a new item, so or we can change it back to item itself. So if I want to add a new item, so I will call this post method, okay, and I will give these inputs: ID, SKU ID, quantity, string. So if I give this input, I will get a response. If you don't give a correct one, you will get this invalid input. You give the right one, you will get a 200 response. Similarly, for get, if I want to get details about a particular item, so I will call a get method. I will say item and I can give the particular item details. So I can give the ID of the item, and if it is successful, I will get a response with this particular details of that particular item. So I will get the ID, the SKU ID, quantity, status, all these details I will. Similarly, if I want to update a particular item, so I can do a put operation, and in that I have to give this particular details. So it will take it, update it, and it will give the corresponding things. So if it is successful, it will give a 200. If it is failed, incorrect, it will give a 400 if there is invalid ID supplied, or if there is item is not found, 404, or some validation. Similarly with delete also. So you have in delete, you can give the similar type of things, and you can give the item ID, or you can give what, if you want to have other details, you can create one more and you can give more details. But in this example, we are giving just the ID, and we will give the delete method. If it is successfully deleted, it will say 200. If it is not able to do so, if that ID was incorrect, we'll give that 400. This is for item, so I think this is a mistake. I have updated, copied this from the pet store example. So this particular thing. So basically, for 200 successfully deleted, 400 means invalid ID, or you can give 404 also. So whatever you decide or define here, it will be shown here. So you see these items, get get is here, and with option you have all these things we discussed, right? Tags, which will tell what it is about, summary, some details about what it does, description also, similar thing. And then what method is there inside that, what inputs it takes, all these details you will give here. And then what you are returning in terms of response, that is also present here. So 200 means it has actually worked successfully, and it is going to return you this particular item. So now we will look at the schemas. So we spoke about schemas, right? So under components we have schemas. So we have an item object. You can have item or SKU, both are fine. So here we are returning an item. So here it is an object, it has these properties, it has ID, and then SKU ID, and then it has some quantity, status, all these details are there. So if you are returning one item, it will contain these things. If you are returning multiple items, right? So you want to get all the items, so you can return it as an array. Okay, and in the request you will have what is it that you are giving. Sometimes you will give a request to update a particular item, or if you want to delete a particular item. So all those things you can define as part of these components. So here you have schemas, in that you have these things, and you can also give some reusable components. So if you are using something over and over again here, so here also you are using giving in delete also, you are giving a request body. If you are giving it in update also, or in this put also, you can define those things here inside these components, and you can call them over and over again. It's like calling, defining a method and calling it again and again. Instead of writing the same code, you will write a function, keep it once, and keep calling that, right? So similar way you can do that. So high level, this is the thing about the specifications, how you define and where it is running. So it is running in this local host. So I will, when we go to the actual implementation, so this is all still just saying what is there inside the API, how it is running, what is the code. There has to be some code, right? So if I call this particular method, some class or some function or some script program needs to be running, which has to take this particular input and do something. So if I'm calling from post, it has to take that particular input and actually go and add a new item, which means it has to write to the database or do something there. So that part we will see in the next hands-on. So this is just the specification where we are telling what this API does. The other hands-on will show you to write the other half of the API where you take these inputs and then you do something with it. Okay. Any questions? If we are clear, we can actually go to the next hands-on. You can also see one simple thing where all these APIs are listed. So if you see somebody has created APIs for various purposes. So assistant. So this is a machine learning assistant. So they have listed the APIs here. So if you see basic way of listing, so they have listed this. NASA is one way. So here Watson Open API specifications they have listed, or you can see that here, like we saw last week, other specific API specifications are also listed. We have different ways of listing these specifications. Any other questions? Arvind, do you want to add any points before we go to the hands-on?
No, let's go
No,
on.
let's
Yeah.
go. Okay, now let us go back to the instructions once again. So, for those of you who were here last week, who attended the session, you can directly go into step seven. For others, basically what we are trying to do is to write the API implementation. We are going to use the Google Cloud. So there is a free limit available in which we are actually which we will use to create the particular implementation. It will be in node.js, the implementation for this particular API specification. You need to have a Google or a Gmail account, and then you have to go to this particular URL. So we can copy this here. Reference list. Please provide for examples. I didn't understand the question. What is a reference list? Okay, like NASA. Okay. So you want to go and see the okay examples. Okay, you can see this one also.
Your screen share is
Screen
off,
share is off.
Danish.
Yeah. Okay, that is the URL for the Watson APIs. NASA anyway, I think is there in the material. I'll again paste it. So, are there any people who have not attended last week's session? Can, there are many. If everybody has attended last week's, we can directly go to the step 7. Otherwise, you have to do up to these things. To step number 7, you have to do again.
Let's quickly do it, Danish. So like 2 minutes. 2 minutes, everybody, give time to everybody to do it. Put it in the open full screen mode so that people can follow.
So I have tested this one and this command.
So everyone go to the Google Cloud Shell that you used last week by clicking on that URL, ssh.cloud.google.com/cloud shell. That is shared in the chat window. So once you go there, you'll see the Cloud Shell editor. You would have to use your Google login, right? Like last time. So you'll see the screen what Danesh is showing on this currently on the screen. And last week we also cloned the Git repository, the step number 4. Just keep the instructions for like 2 minutes, Danesh, so that people can follow.
Sure.
And once you clone it, you change the directory into the newly created folder, ACM API workshop. After that, you need to install Express using the command that is shown on the screen, npm install and express, npm install express. That you need to type it in the shell. It will take a few minutes to install the Express. After that, you need to type in the node index.js. That basically starts the APIs that Danish has already created for us. So hope everyone, Danish, you can start now. Everyone
Yeah,
probably done it.
sure. So I have just opened this file. So if you want to do that, you can type edit index.js. So if you are running Node already, you can kill that. Just actually look. So if you have done this, Control C and come out, put edit index.js. If you want to see it on your screen, but if you want to follow with me, no need to do that. Okay, so just sharing the details. So let us look at the code and then we'll run it. So what are we doing here? So we are basically using this framework called Express.js, which helps us do HTTP operations, right? So uh, again, to recap, why are we doing this? We are basically doing this to implement this, whatever methods we have put here, whether it is for get, put, post, whatever we have created, right? So we want to update the item, we want to get item details, right? We want to add a new item, or we want to, let's say, delete an item. So all these things we want to do. For this, we are writing the backend code. Here, simply we have written that these are the facilities that are available. Like a laundry menu card, we are saying this shirt is available for dry cleaning for this much. I mean, it costs so much to dry clean a particular shirt. Now somebody has to actually go and do that dry cleaning. So that part is what we are going to do here. Some people are going to actually do the back end work. So here this back end code is the one that will do the actual operations. So to do that, what we are there is some code which we have written here, which uses Express framework, and then see sometimes the browser will actually cause some problems. So if you are running the code here and it is not in the same domain, which means if I am running the code from this particular location and if you are accessing from another location, then this cars problem will come in. So that is why for now just think of it that it is a security mechanism where we are saying for development purpose allow all the requests. So sometimes otherwise what will happen is if I'm going to do the web preview, this browser might block that, or this server will block that particular request. So you will not see any response. So to allow that, we are saying allow this.
So it would be a homework for all of you to understand more about CARS. CARS is actually a built-in security mechanism that is there for HTTP requests, where request from one domain by default is not allowed by the other domain, right? Unless there is a actual agreement that the domain from where the service is being accessed is allowed. So you Google it and then read about it. It's a very important concept for how the web works. So whenever you have to use APIs, and the APIs that we implement needs to support CORS, it's called cross origin resource sharing. So then only people who wants to use your API can use it for from other domains. Suppose say your API is hosted on something like www.myserver.com, and somebody is trying to use your API from a different domain, right? Like say www.somebodyelseserver.com. So they cannot directly use your API unless you support CORS, your API support CORS. So that is where what Danesh has added there. Please do reading, that will be useful for you.
Okay, now this is so we can start from here. So one is this is a placeholder. So if somebody calls this particular API without giving any inputs, okay, we'll just say that some inventory service will serve. You can give whatever message, or you can say inventory service needs more parameters. Okay, so so what this we are doing is you got a call at the slash at the root. Nobody gave any input here. Okay, so you basically are telling them that it needs more parameters. So you can't call like this. So you should call like this. Should give this one. But this nobody will do this because they are coming from this particular specification. So they will follow this particular path. We have defined the path. So we have actually put that. So why this message is required is if somebody is not reading this specification, simply they are just calling that particular API. So we are giving some message saying needs more parameters, or we can say go and read that specification. Don't call this particular slash, like that we can say, because this is not as per the specification. As per the specification, we are only supposed to serve this particular item and SKU ID. So if you are going to the laundry and if you are giving a lungi or something and saying that for shirt cost you have to do this dry cleaning, they will not accept, right? So similarly, you have to basically go to the right path, create the, and then expect that particular response. So here we are saying if there is a get method that is coming, request that is coming at slash item, and you are giving some ID, then give the response. So I have created some response and I am giving it back to that particular request. We will see this. And then we will see how other methods are also implemented. Once we see the first one, it becomes easy to see the other methods. So you are, from a code point of view, we are using Express. to help us implement this HTTP GET method, which is going to respond to requests at this particular path. Okay, this particular server slash item, and if you give a ID, it will respond to this. What will it respond? It will give you, forget this console.log, that is to check whether our method is working or not. It will basically, you should be interested only in this particular path. So it is going to give you the details of that item. So you want a chocolate or you want a shirt or whatever. So you go to this particular item. So normally we will not go directly. So if we go, think about the scenario again. In the scenario, it is going to come from this e-commerce application. You are placing an order. It is going to this OMS. That OMS is checking for this item availability. So this OMS is actually going to give this item and this ID, saying there is a person who is buying this milk chocolate. Give me the details of this. This inventory item API is going to respond with that particular details. So it is going to say what is the name, type, weight, expiry date. It can also say number of units in stock, right? So I can say stock, and then I can say yes, yeah, something like that. So I can do that. So if I do that, I will get a response. Now let us see how it works. So run it. You say node index.js. Now it has started. Next step is you click on web preview and change the port to 8501. Web preview is here on the right hand side. You click on this. Okay. So you can change the port. So you come here, type this. By default, it goes to 8080. I ran this before. So for me, it is already showing 8501. Anyway, you type it here and then you say change and preview. So it went to the default part because I didn't give any parameters here. Okay, it is giving some server URL. Okay, instead of local host, it is running on the Google Cloud. So Google Cloud is giving this big URL. Okay, after that, instead of item or the some meaningful things according to this spec, it is not having any of those parameters. It is having some question mark auth user equal to 0. You should also see this, be seeing this in your environment when you run this. So what you should do is remove this part and then go and say item slash one. Then you will get the details in a JSON format. Let me know if you are facing any difficulty. So all we are doing is we are actually running this particular service, which is actually listening on this particular server in this Google Cloud server, and it is basically responding to requests that are coming to this particular URL endpoint. If you are giving a request here, it will tell you needs more parameters, something like that. If you give the right inputs, which means you give item and the item number, then it will give you this particular item details. As you can see, this is just a hard coding, but in real life, you will either go to a database or you will call another API or you will talk to another application and get those details. So as I mentioned to you, so here this inventory API will actually talk to an inventory system to get the details and it will give it back to this particular OMS. But here we don't have that. So we are just putting hard coding a string here and then we are giving the response as a JSON. So you can put whatever you want here. So here I'm just showing some details where there is a name, type, all these things are coming. Okay. And because browser will support GET request, you don't need to have a separate client. You can just put it in here and you can get the response. But if you want to implement other methods, let's say, for example, you want to try post or you want to try put or delete. You can't do this from the browser. So in post, if you remember, we wanted to insert a particular item. In put, we want to update an item. In delete, we want to delete an item. So in real life scenario, this will actually go and insert into a DB, or it will call some method or some application code, and it will do that particular insert operation or update operation or delete operation. But here, all we are doing is we are basically saying that this particular, we are just hard coding it, saying item created, item updated, item deleted. Okay. And one thing which I forgot to tell you was, how is this particular code listening on this 8501? This particular statement is the one that is enabling it to do. So this express will listen on this particular 8501, and as soon as it starts, there is an arrow function that logs into the console saying it is listening. So now if you want to try out these other methods, how will you do? You will basically have to use the command line client, the code that has been written here. So if you see here, there is a command line client. Instead of a browser, we will have to use this client where we will actually call this uh, particular code. So we will call this particular URL. So this is not different from what we learned last week, the sample client, right, which was calling this NASA API, similar piece of code. So just to juggle or refresh the memory. So we are, instead of going directly to NASA, we are actually taking that input from the command line. So here we will open another window here, another terminal rather, and here we will run this particular thing. We will give the input to this particular command line client with the URL. So for example, localhost, this thing, whatever we want, you will give, and you will give the method name. So instead of get, you can say post or put or delete. And then what will happen is it will take those inputs, it will actually set the particular method. All these we saw last week, and then it will make that particular request to a HTTP request. It will get the response, and it will basically log that particular data. So this, all these things we saw last week. So let us run this for other operations. For this, again, for the get, browser itself is sufficient. For post, put and delete, we will use this particular command line REST client. For this also, you can just refer to the instructions here. So here, come back and copy this particular thing. Just the last line. And once you have opened this, don't close this thing, because if you close this or control C, whatever, if you do, then this main service, right, which is going to give that response, that is dead. It will not give you any response. Keep this open. In this, that node has to be running, node index.js. And then you basically here paste whatever you saw. Node cmd REST client, command line REST client, give the URL. So for here inside this, you can say localhost, because it is both in the same server. Only if you come through the browser, as Arvind also mentioned, it is like a different server from where we are accessing. Here we are accessing it from the same place. These cars, all these problems will not come. So now you change the directory. Good, I made this mistake. So do a ACM. Otherwise, you will again get an error. Some error will come. So just make sure you are in the right directory. I was in the wrong directory. So once I made the change, I ran the client. Okay, this is the URL it connected to. It used the method as post, and then the item got created. Now, if I want to do put, again, URL method is put, item got updated. If I want to delete, item got deleted. So these are all the stub methods, which means they are all basically just telling you simply that something happened. In a real life situation, like I said, it will either talk to a database, talk to another application, maybe invoke another API, right? So all those type of things will happen inside this. So this is the hands-on for today. Any questions, anything you want to clarify, you can put it in the chat window. So we implemented these things here. So whatever we had in terms of delete, we had put, get, post, all are implemented. So if you download and there is an option to download and run this. If you are interested, you can download and run this in your local machine, both the code and the Swagger editor. Instead of running it on Google Cloud, you can download this and you can take that code, whatever is there in Google Cloud, and you can run it on your local machine. There, if you do that, here itself you can try it out, because this is on different server. If I do this try it out, it will not work. So if you want to do it in your local laptop or desktop, you can download this Swagger editor. There is a download link to this in their website. You can, if you are interested, you can do that. Arvind, you want to add anything?
This is good. Thanks, Danish. I don't have to add anything. There's one question I think about somebody was asking about how do I switch the port to 8501? So you might want to just explain.
Okay. So if you want to change the port, right hand side, just next to your profile, you will have a web preview. Click on that. Once you click, you will see these options. Change port. In this, you have to type 8501. Change and preview. So then if you want to give the item, if you want to see the item details, remove that. So this instruction from here, it is there in that slide also. Just delete this question mark or user equals 0, type item /1, and you will get the response. Hope that is clear.
So maybe we want to quickly summarize. So week one, what we did, all of you probably attended week one. In any case, just a recap. In week one, we understood what are APIs, why APIs are important, what role APIs play, how APIs abstract the complexity of the service implementations, what are the different use cases where APIs are used. And we also went into the API, what makes up an API, right? The API specification, and there is API consumer or API client, and then the API implementation. And also what we did in week one is that we took a sample API from NASA and then we developed a client, node.js based client using Google Cloud Shell to call the API. So what we did in week two, what we did, we learned about how do we design an API using Open APIs. Open API is a specification using which we can specify the API, what makes up an API. So in this case, it's an inventory API, as you saw. It basically allows us to understand what is the inventory levels of, from a e-commerce point of view. So it has various methods as part of the API, which one can uh, use and find the status, right? So that's what you have seen. So what we did as part of that, we saw a sample open API specification and how the API is specified. And Danish has showed you the code also, the YAML file, which basically has all the parts that are required for you to specify an API. And then what we did, you had the sample code that Danish has put it already on GitHub, which you have used, you cloned it using Git, and then you basically ran the API, and you have seen the code of the API as well, right? The implementation of the API using Node.js and Express. Express and Node.js are very popular. Node.js itself is a very popular technology. Those of you already know JavaScript. JavaScript is a fairly simple language. It is like C-like language without the pointers, right? So that's what JavaScript is. So without the complexity of pointers. So you can use JavaScript. JavaScript is available in every browser. You don't have to install anything, right? Chrome has built-in JavaScript. Whenever you do HTML development, you would have been using JavaScript. So Node.js is essentially based on JavaScript. It uses the same JavaScript engine that Chrome uses. It's called Chrome V8. So it basically, Node.js uses the same engine, and then you can develop server-side applications like how do you create an API. So you can use Node.js to create an API. Express is a framework that is built on top of Node.js for us to simplify creation of APIs. So that's what we did using the code. When we press the edit and we saw the code, that is essentially Express code written in Node.js, right? Which is JavaScript. So that is the whole thing that we did. And then we ran the Express server that is on Node.js, and then we access the URL, right, of the API, right? So that is all we did. So Danish, you want to quickly show Postman also, and then see how you can use Postman to access the same API if it works. Do you think it works?
Yeah, one second. I was just looking at this chat window. They were getting some error. So, um, see the file name different. You have to do a pull from the Git repository. Okay, so uh, you have to just get the latest thing. Okay, so you should be able to fix it. If you are not able to do that, then instead of CMD REST client, just run REST client itself. You don't want to refresh. I think some update happened after that instruction. So the REST client and CMD REST client are the same thing. Node API client is not required. Node API client is for the first week's exercise.
Hello,
That is to connect to his thing,
Dr.
uh,
Gopal.
NASA.
Dr. Gopal. Hello. Do you have Dr. Gopal on the call?
Very, very feeble, right, Dr. Gopal is.
Is he there? I mean, I don't think he's there, right? I thought if he has anything to add, so I thought. Okay, he's not there. Okay, go ahead.
So this Postman is a standard or a ready-made, readily available client. So if you go to postman.com, you can get it. Earlier they used to have a different ID. So last week we actually wrote a client to talk to uh, NASA's API, right? Photo of the day. So same thing you can do it using Postman. So you can actually call that here. So if you have you let's say say get, okay, and then you can get the URL. So if I want to, let's say, go to NASA's API, right? So this is the API URL. So I've already put that here. Okay, so I'll just paste it here. Then So I'll just paste this URL here, API NASA this thing. This is the API key which we used in the client. So there are some options also which you can uh, give. So last week we didn't see the options. We just gave the basic this thing. So if I show you this particular thing, so photo of the day. So this is the API endpoint. So it takes a lot of parameters. So we only gave the API key last week. So in this we can give the date also. So which day's photo you want to see, right? Something like that. So I can give New Year's Day, whatever there. So API that thing, API key, and then give the date. So it will give a response. These things, that particular postman client will fill it by itself. So if it's a get request and if you are giving some parameters, right? So there are two parameters which you are giving after this. Till here is your server, your endpoint, API endpoint. After this question mark, whatever comes are your parameters. First one, API key. It has parsed it and put it here. Second one, date. It has taken and put it here. Okay. So these two things. So you can even type it here if you want to, or you can give it here. Now, once you do that, you get a response. Now, in this response, you got a photo of the day for New Year day, whatever they were showing. So if I click on this, let me open this in a browser. So that day's photo you will get. So if I change the date to maybe today or whatever, right? So if I don't give this, I will get it for today. So let me remove this one. See, this is gone. I can delete it here or here. Now if I say send, I will again get a response. This time I get a different one. See, something else. This is today's photo. So basically, whatever we did last week, we wrote this particular client where we were getting this particular URL and then we were giving the API key and then we were parsing the response, etc. All those things are available in these clients like Postman, apart from other features. So you can do testing using this, you can do some kind of automation, all those things you can do. Not only get, put, post, you can make a lot of things. Many features are available in these type of clients. And see, there is a different color code for this response. It will give you how much time it took, what is the size, you can save it, any cookies if they are set, and other header details, so many things. I mean, it is good for writing the code and testing it. It will give you a lot of features. If there is some question, or rather it's a feedback form, date is 8th April.
That's fine. Yeah. So we have the record of the date at where the uh, feedback is given. So
Um, that is what uh, we had from the hands-on point of view. Arvind, you want to give
I think we are
concluding?
good. So thanks everyone for joining, and please. So the video is already up for the last week, and this week's one also will be up in next 2-3 days. So I'm sharing it in the chat window also. For last week's, those who missed, they can go through it, and then this week video also will be there. Please go through it from a learning perspective. This will be very, very useful for you whenever you need to develop APIs or consume APIs. Next week, we will go a little bit more advanced. So that's why I suggest all of you to go through both videos. Maybe if required, revise it one more time. Next week, we will go into a bit more aspects of API gateways and security. So that will help you to understand real world how APIs are basically deployed. So that will complete this particular API workshop. right? So it would basically make you ready for at least basic level, ready for developing real world APIs. So hope to see you all on next Thursday again at same time, 4:30. Yeah. Please fill in the feedback form. That will also be your attendance form, and check the videos for revision. Thank you.
Thank you.